She was my friend's mom. Confident, warm, and impossible to ignore. I told myself what we felt was wrong, until she smiled and whispered, "Then why does it feel so right?" It started on an ordinary Saturday, the kind where time feels slower, the air heavy with sunlight and the hum of distant traffic. I was supposed to meet my friend, Mark, to help him move some old furniture. When I rang the bell, it wasn't him who opened the door. It was his mother, Elena. I'd seen her before, but never like this. Not when the house was so quiet, not when the light framed her in that calm, unguarded way. She wore a loose, cream-colored blouse and soft jeans, her hair tied loosely at the back, a few strands brushing her cheeks. She smiled, warm and effortless. "Oh," he ran to the store. "You must have just missed him." Her tone carried that steady kindness that only comes from people who've lived a little more, patient, calm, slightly amused by the world. I offered to wait outside, but she shook her head. "Don't be silly. Come in, at least for a coffee." Inside, the house felt different from what I remembered. Less like a place where a friend hung out, more like a space full of quiet stories. Sunlight filtered through the wide kitchen window, falling across a bowl of lemons on the counter. A soft instrumental song played from the next room, something with a guitar, slow and unhurried. She moved easily, almost gracefully, as she filled the kettle. I watched the small things, the way her hand rested on the countertop, the way she tilted her head when listening. When she glanced back, her eyes caught mine, and I looked away a little too fast. "So, how's life treating you these days?" she asked, pouring steaming water over the coffee grounds. "Busy, I guess, trying to figure things out." She smiled knowingly. "That doesn't really stop, you know?" Her words made me laugh, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way she said it, not like advice but like a confession. When she handed me a mug, her fingers brushed mine, just briefly. I felt it more than I should have, that quiet, accidental warmth. We sat at the small kitchen table, the kind with tiny scratches and a vase of fading flowers. She asked about my studies, my plans, and I found myself speaking more openly than usual. She listened the way few people did, eyes steady, expression soft but attentive. And in between the small talk, I realized how calm I felt. There was no rush, no pretense. Just the faint scent of vanilla from her perfume, the clink of our cups, the sunlight stretching across the table like a lazy hand. At one point, she laughed, really laughed, and the sound filled the room, warm and melodic. I remember thinking that it didn't feel like I was talking to my friend's mom anymore. It felt like I was talking to someone who understood things I hadn't even said aloud. When Mark texted that he'd be late, I expected her to suggest I leave. Instead, she smiled, a little teasingly. "Guess it's just the two of us then." And in that simple line, the air seemed to shift. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet awareness that this afternoon wasn't going to be as ordinary as I thought. The coffee had gone cold, but neither of us seemed to notice. What started as small talk had slowly become something else, something more open, more human. Elena wasn't the kind of person who filled silence just to avoid it. She let quiet moments breathe. It made me aware of everything. The ticking of the wall clock, the rustle of the trees outside, the way her eyes softened when she spoke about her life. She told me how things had changed since Mark started spending more time away. "The house feels different," she said, glancing toward the empty hallway. "Quieter. I used to think I liked quiet, but now I'm not so sure." There was a note in her voice that lingered, a kind of loneliness she didn't try to hide. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. I admired that about her. People my age tend to fill silence with noise, but she carried hers like something she'd learned to live with. "You ever get tired of pretending you're fine?" I asked before realizing how personal that sounded. Her eyes lifted to mine, curious. Then she smiled faintly, the corner of her mouth curving with quiet recognition. "All the time," she admitted. "But you learn to smile through it. It's easier for everyone else." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt heavy with something unspoken. Not sadness exactly, but understanding. I could feel her eyes on me, not studying, just seeing. It made my pulse unsteady. She leaned back slightly in her chair, fingertips resting on her coffee cup. "You remind me of him when he was younger," she said, referring to her son. "But you listen more." I laughed softly, trying to hide how her words made me feel. Warm, seen, a little uncertain. Maybe I just haven't learned to talk over people yet. That made her laugh, really laugh this time, and the sound filled the kitchen. When it faded, her expression turned thoughtful again. "You're easy to talk to," she said quietly, as if the realization surprised even her. I didn't know what to say. Compliments from someone like her felt different. Less about charm, more about truth. The kind that lingers long after it's spoken. She stood to refill her cup, and as she passed me, her hand brushed my shoulder in that casual, natural way people do when they're comfortable. But the touch stayed with me long after she moved away. The faint scent of her perfume followed, something floral and warm, like late spring. Outside, clouds drifted lazily across the sun, dimming the room for a second. The air between us felt charged, yet calm. She didn't have to say anything, and neither did I. There was an understanding, quiet, mutual, and somehow comforting. When she sat again, she looked at me with a soft smile. "It's nice having someone here who doesn't rush to leave," she said. And though she didn't know it, I wasn't rushing to go anywhere. There was something grounding about her presence, a kind of calm I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We talked until the afternoon light turned golden, the air slow and warm around us. And in that stillness, I understood that connection doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just grows in the quiet between two people who stop pretending they're fine. The sun had dipped lower, stretching long amber streaks across the kitchen floor. I hadn't realized how much time had passed until my phone buzzed against the table. A message from Mark. "Sorry, man. Got caught up. Won't make it back tonight. Can we reschedule?" I stared at the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the reply button. When I looked up, Elena was already watching me. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone light but knowing. "Yeah," I said slowly. "He's not coming back tonight." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "So it's just us, then." The way she said it wasn't suggestive or teasing. It was matter of fact, yet something in her voice made the air feel denser. She turned to tidy the table, and I caught myself watching the way she moved, calm and unhurried. I stood up, unsure what to do with my hands or the silence. "I should probably get going," I said, though my voice didn't sound convincing even to me. She looked back, one corner of her mouth curving in that subtle half-smile I was beginning to recognize. "If you want to," she said, "but it's still early." Her words hung there, simple, open, but somehow weighted. I sat back down. "I don't want to impose." "You're not," she said softly. "It's just nice having someone to talk to." Her gaze lingered a beat too long before she turned away, but the warmth in her voice pulled me in. I couldn't remember the last time someone made me feel both at ease and completely uncertain at the same time. Outside, the light had softened to that quiet, honey-colored glow that makes everything look a little more beautiful. Or maybe I was just seeing differently. Elena poured herself another glass of water, then hesitated. "You want something else?" "Wine maybe." I hesitated too. "You sure?" She smiled, and there was a hint of mischief now, gentle, playful. "Just one glass. We'll call it a grown-up reward for surviving the day." I laughed, though I could feel a flicker of nervousness beneath it. As she poured, I noticed the way her hand steadied the bottle, the light catching her bracelet as she set it down. When she passed me the glass, our fingers brushed again. Not by accident this time. We sat in the living room, the soft clink of glass on with the only sound. The conversation drifted between harmless topics. Music, travel, the things we wish we'd done differently. But under it all, something else moved quietly, an awareness neither of us wanted to name. At one point, she leaned back on the couch, looking at me through the soft light of the lamp. "You're quiet," she said. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I looked down at my glass, just thinking how strange this feels. Her lips curved again, slow and calm. "Strange isn't always bad," she said. eyes not leaving mine. For a moment, the world outside disappeared. No judgment, no noise, just that delicate stillness between us. And though no lines had been crossed, something inside me knew that the evening had already shifted. Whatever this was, friendship, comfort, curiosity, it had begun to grow roots. When she stood to turn off the kitchen light, her shadow moved across the room like a whisper. I realized then that I didn't want to leave. Not yet. Not while her presence still made everything else fade to quiet. The living room glowed in that calm, amber light that only early evening can hold. Elena stood by the shelf, looking over a collection of framed photos, family moments frozen in time. I rose to join her, feeling the comfortable quiet between us stretch and settle. She turned slightly, smiling. I've been meaning to rearrange these for months. They've been sitting the same way since, well, forever. Her tone was light, but I could hear the faint ache behind it. Want a hand? I asked. Her eyes met mine, amused. You don't have to. I want to. Something softened in her face. She nodded once, then handed me a frame. Careful with that one. It's glass. I took it from her, fingers brushing hers again. Small contact, but enough to make my pulse trip. The photo was of her and Mark at the beach years ago, sunlight and saltwater caught mid-laughter. Her hair was shorter then, her smile the same. You look happy there, I said quietly. She glanced at the picture and smiled, a little wistful. That was before life got complicated. There was honesty in her words, but no bitterness, just reflection. She moved a few steps closer to adjust another frame, her shoulder grazing mine. The contact was accidental or maybe not, but neither of us moved away. You're good at this, she said after a moment. You take your time. Guess I didn't want to break anything. Her laugh was soft, close to my ear. You couldn't if you tried. For a few minutes we worked in that calm rhythm, passing frames, deciding what went where, our movements quiet and in sync. The air smelled faintly of lavender from a nearby candle, and the sound of rain began tapping gently against the window, as if the world outside was slowing to match our pace. When we finished, she stepped back to look at the wall, arms crossed lightly. You've got a good eye, she said. Everything looks balanced. I glanced at her, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Maybe it's because you do. She turned her head, meeting my gaze. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. There was warmth there, real human warmth, but something unspoken, too. She seemed to sense it, because her expression softened again, less guarded now. Thank you, she said, her voice quieter. I nodded, not trusting my own. She reached out then, fingers brushing my forearm in a simple gesture of gratitude. But it stayed longer than it needed to. The touch wasn't bold or rushed. It was gentle, deliberate, full of quiet meaning. My skin felt warm beneath her hand. When she finally stepped back, she smiled. I should make us something to eat. You've earned it. The normalcy of her tone steadied the air, though a spark still lingered, faint but alive. I watched her move toward the kitchen, the soft sway of her hair, the sound of drawers opening and closing. As I followed, the room behind us glowed with the last light of day, the rearranged photos catching bits of gold, the scent of lavender hanging still in the air. And for the first time, I wasn't just visiting a friend's house. I was somewhere that felt quietly alive, somewhere I suddenly didn't want to leave. By the time dinner was done, the sky had settled into a deep shade of violet. Rain tapped gently against the windows, the kind that sounds more like a rhythm than a storm. Elena and I sat in the living room again, the plates cleared away, a pot of tea steaming between us on the small wooden table. The house felt smaller now, quieter, as if the walls themselves had leaned in to listen. She poured the tea carefully, her movements slow and thoughtful. You know, she said, her voice soft, I used to think I had everything figured out. Marriage, family, plans, all that. Her tone wasn't bitter, just tired in an honest way. She looked down at her cup, the steam rising like faint smoke. Then life reminds you that even the best plans come with cracks. I listened quietly, my elbows resting on my knees. You sound like someone who's learned that the hard way. She laughed under her breath. Not the amused kind, but the kind that hides a sigh. Maybe, or maybe that's just getting older. You learn what matters and what doesn't. I hesitated, watching her expression. There was a fragility there she rarely showed, a softness that made her seem both strong and exposed. And what matters to you now? I asked. She met my gaze, holding it for a long moment before answering. Peace and honesty. Something about the way she said it, almost a whisper, almost a confession, made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask if she was happy, but the question felt too heavy, too personal. She seemed to sense the thought anyway. You're thinking too hard, she said with a small smile. You always do. I smiled back, half embarrassed. I just don't want to say the wrong thing. Her eyes softened. There's no wrong thing if it's real. The words lingered, gentle but weighted. I felt myself exhale, realizing how rarely people said things that true. I guess, I said quietly, we stop ourselves sometimes. We do what's expected, even if it doesn't feel right. Elena looked at me, and there was a stillness in her eyes, the kind that holds both understanding and pain. And sometimes, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, doing what feels right is what scares us the most. Neither of us looked away. The sound of rain filled the silence, steady and soft. She reached for her cup, her hand trembling just slightly, then set it back down untouched. I'm sorry, she said after a moment, though she wasn't smiling anymore. I don't usually talk like this. You just make it easy. The way she said it, quiet, unguarded, made my throat tighten. I'm glad you did, I said, my voice low. The air between us felt charged again, but different now. Not new or uncertain, but familiar, like something that had been waiting to be seen. She leaned back, taking a deep breath. Strange, isn't it? She said softly. How sometimes a simple conversation changes everything. I nodded slowly, the truth of it settling deep in my chest. Outside, the rain began to fade, leaving the world hushed. Inside, her eyes found mine again, and for the first time, I realized neither of us was pretending anymore. By the time we finished our tea, the clock had crept past 10. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside washed clean and still. The air felt heavier now, not from discomfort, but from everything that hadn't been said. I stood slowly, the movement feeling reluctant. I should probably head out, I murmured, half expecting her to nod, half hoping she wouldn't. Elena rose too, walking me to the door. The hallway light was dim, casting a soft golden glow over the walls and her face. She looked calm, but her eyes gave her away. They held something I hadn't seen before. Thank you, she said quietly, folding her arms as if holding something back. For listening, for staying. I didn't mind, I said, managing a small smile. It was nice. The word felt small, weak even, for what the night had been. She noticed it too. Her lips curved faintly, almost amused. Nice, she repeated, the word rolling off her tongue with gentle irony. I rubbed the back of my neck, suddenly nervous. I don't know what else to call it. Her gaze lingered on me, steady and searching. Sometimes we don't need to name things, she said softly. We just feel them. I felt my heartbeat in my chest, quick and unsteady. There was a pause. One of those delicate, suspended moments where time feels like it's holding its breath. Then, she stepped a little closer. The scent of her perfume, warm, floral, faintly sweet, surrounded me. She looked up at me, her eyes catching the light just enough to shimmer. You know, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. You've been sitting here all evening trying to convince yourself this is wrong. I swallowed, the words catching in my throat. Isn't it? Her lips curved into a small, knowing smirk. Not mocking, but tender, like she was seeing right through me. You call this wrong? She said softly. Feels right to me. The words hit harder than I expected. Not bold, not even flirtatious, but honest. A quiet truth, spoken without apology. She reached up then, her fingers brushing lightly against my collar as if straightening it. The touch was gentle, her hand trembling just slightly. My breath caught. Neither of us moved. Her hand lingered near my chest, and I could feel the faint warmth of her palm through the fabric. The world outside seemed impossibly still, only the distant dripping of rain and the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I wanted to say something, anything, but words felt too small. All I could do was stand there, caught between restraint and the pull of something I didn't want to name. Her eyes searched mine for a long, silent moment before she exhaled softly, as if letting go of something she'd been holding for too long. "Good night," she whispered, her voice low and calm. I nodded, barely trusting my voice. "Good night, Elena." As I stepped out into the cool night air, the door closing softly behind me. Her words echoed in my mind, replaying over and over. "You call this wrong? Feels right to me." The line wasn't a confession, not really, it was an acknowledgement of what we both knew but hadn't dared to say aloud. And walking down the quiet street, I realized I wasn't sure if I felt guilty or alive. Maybe both. The night air was cool as I walked home, the kind of stillness that makes every sound seem louder. The distant hum of traffic, the rhythmic fall of my footsteps, the soft echo of rain dripping from the trees. I didn't feel like the same person who'd arrived at that house earlier in the day. Something subtle but permanent had shifted. Elena's words followed me like a quiet melody that refused to fade. "You call this wrong? Feels right to me." They weren't bold or defiant, just honest, like a truth she'd carried for too long and finally allowed to breathe. And though nothing had happened beyond that single touch, that shared moment, the weight of it lingered in my chest. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was awareness of her, of myself, of how simple moments can change everything. When I reached home, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just stood in the dark, letting the silence settle. I could still smell the faint trace of her perfume on my shirt, that soft mix of vanilla and something floral. It wasn't overpowering, just human, familiar. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. The calm in her eyes, the warmth in her smile, the way she'd looked at me not with expectation, but understanding. She wasn't asking for anything. She was simply there, and for reasons I couldn't explain, that was enough to keep my heart restless until morning. When sunlight finally crept through the blinds, everything looked too bright, too ordinary. The kind of day that pretends nothing ever happened. Yet something inside me knew it had. I went about my morning distracted, made coffee, checked my phone, stared at messages I couldn't bring myself to answer. For a while, I debated whether to reach out, to thank her, to apologize. I wasn't sure which. In the end, I didn't do any of it. I just waited. Days passed, and I told myself to let it fade. But the memory didn't dull. It softened instead, the way certain moments do when they stop being confusing and start making quiet sense. Then, one afternoon, I found myself walking that same familiar street without planning to. The neighborhood looked the same. Trimmed hedges, wind chimes, the hum of sprinklers. But standing in front of her house felt different, calmer. When the door opened, Elena stood there, dressed casually, her expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, that same gentle smile appeared. "I was wondering if you'd stop by," she said softly. I smiled back, my heart steady for once. I wasn't sure if I should. "You're here," she said simply, stepping aside. "That's enough." We ended up sitting on the porch, side by side, not saying much. The sunlight filtered through the trees, scattering gold across the wooden floorboards. Birds moved through the branches above us, their calls blending into the afternoon air. No tension, no pretense, just a shared quiet that somehow said everything we hadn't. And in that stillness, I understood what she meant that night, how sometimes what feels right doesn't need explanation. Because it wasn't about breaking rules or chasing something forbidden. It was about finding peace in a place neither of us expected, and realizing that, against all reason, it had always been there, waiting quietly for the right moment to begin. Headphone if you felt that warmth between them too. Don't forget to hit like, share this story, and subscribe for more slow burn age gap romances. Speech balloon, tell me in the comments. Would you have gone back to see her? or walked away for good.